Earth has been running for roughly 4.5 billion years. Your session started somewhere in the last few decades. Nobody asked if you wanted to play. There was no character select screen, no difficulty setting, no tutorial prompt asking if this was your first time. You just loaded in, naked, screaming, with zero context, and the game was already moving. The map you spawned into was not your choice. The characters standing over you when you arrived were not your choice. The language they spoke, the resources they had, the stability or chaos of the environment, none of it was yours to decide. Some players loaded into zones with clean water, good shelter, 2 stable support characters, and a functioning local server. Others loaded into noise, scarcity, and danger before they could even open their eyes. The distribution was not balanced. It was never going to be. But here's the thing about Earth that most players never figure out, some not even by the end of their run. The spawn conditions, the ones that feel so definitive in the early game, are not what determine how the run actually goes. There are deeper mechanics underneath everything. Systems that govern how a character develops, how the game responds to different kinds of input, what actually produces progress versus what just looks like it. These mechanics are never explained. They are never handed to you. They apply to every single player on the map, regardless of where they spawned. And the gap between the players who discover them and the players who don't is the gap between the ones who feel like the game is working and the ones who spend their entire run wondering why it isn't. The first mechanic most players miss is the one that was supposed to prepare them for all of this. And the reason they miss it is because they think it already did. The game has a tutorial. Every player goes through it. It runs for roughly the first 15 to 18 years of the session, sometimes longer. Older characters facilitate it, the ones who were already on the map when you arrived. They walk you through the surface mechanics, movement, language, social interaction, how to follow instructions, how to function inside the basic systems the game runs on. And the tutorial works. At the surface level, it does exactly what it was designed to do. You come out of it able to operate. You can navigate the map, you can communicate with other characters, you can perform basic tasks and participate in the game's social structures. But here is the design flaw that almost nobody catches. The tutorial only covers the surface mechanics. As the deeper systems, the ones that actually determine the quality of your run, are never mentioned. How your own processing system works, what your character is genuinely built for versus what it was told to be. The mechanics of attention, energy, emotional regulation, decision architecture. The traps, the hidden scoring system, none of it. The tutorial covers enough to keep you functional and absolutely nothing about what makes a run actually good. This is not a flaw in the characters who ran your tutorial. It is a flaw in the tutorial itself. Most of the characters teaching it never discovered the deeper mechanics either. They taught what they knew, which was the surface, and the surface was all they had. The result is a specific kind of player, and there are billions of them on the map right now. Players who finished the tutorial, they assumed they understood the game and never went looking for what was underneath. They are decades into their run, still operating on tutorial-level understanding of a game that has depths they have never even glimpsed. And it compounds, because Earth does something unusual with character stats. In most games, you can see your build. Strength, speed, intelligence, charisma, visible, measurable, right there on the screen so you can plan accordingly. Earth hides yours. Your actual capabilities, your real weaknesses, your genuine potential. None of it is displayed. It is buried inside the character, and the only way to find it is through play. Through attempting things you have never tried and watching what happens. Through failing at something and paying attention to what the failure actually reveals. Through sitting with yourself long enough to separate what you are from what you were told you were during the tutorial. Most players skip this entirely. They take the stats that other characters assign them. Smart, slow, creative, not creative, leader, follower, talented, average, and they play their entire run on those assignments. Assignments that were made by people who were themselves operating on incomplete information during a tutorial that was never designed to assess anyone accurately. Pythagoras observed this 25 centuries ago. He said most people at the game of life fall into two types, those grinding for resources and those grinding for recognition. The rarest type, he said, are the ones who step back and actually try to understand the game itself. He invented the word philosophy to describe that effort. The problem of running a character you have never properly studied inside a game you have never properly examined is not a modern phenomenon. It is the oldest pattern in the game. But the tutorial gap is not the biggest problem with how most players are running. The bigger problem is something that has been operating in the background of their session the entire time, draining performance in ways they cannot see and have never been alerted to. Think of your character's mind like a processor. It has a fixed amount of power available at any given moment. That processing power is what you use to think clearly, make decisions, stay focused, create, solve problems, engage with what is in front of you. It is your most valuable resource in the game. And right now, most of it is being consumed by programs you did not deliberately open and have never consciously closed. Unresolved things, a loss that was never fully processed, a fear that was pushed down instead of faced, a guilt that still runs quietly in the background every single day. Old emotional residue from the tutorial phase that was never addressed, just buried under newer activity. Habits that drain energy without producing anything but keep executing anyway because nobody told them to stop. And every one of these is an open program, and every open program takes processing power, not sometimes, constantly. Whether you're thinking about it or not, it is running. The game disabled the notification system that would normally alert you to how many programs are active, so what you experience instead are the symptoms. The fog, the fatigue, the feeling of never quite operating at full capacity. The sense that your focus is fragmented even when nothing specific is distracting you. You explain it away. You attribute it to the pace of the game, to getting older, to the way things just are. But it is not the way things just are. It is system overload with the alerts turned off. Closing these programs, confronting the thing you have been avoiding, processing the grief you shelved, facing the fear you have been managing around instead of through, is not a soft move. It is one of the highest leverage maintenance operations available in the entire game. Every character running a clean system outperforms their own previous version dramatically, not because they gain new abilities, because they stopped hemorrhaging the abilities they already had. But there is a second silent threat, and this one operates on a longer timeline. Even players who build momentum, who establish good systems, develop direction, start making real progress, are vulnerable to it, because the game has a passive mechanic that degrades everything over time unless you actively maintain it. Entropy, the slow drift toward disorder. You build strong habits, you have clear direction, things are working, and then gradually, and without a single dramatic moment to mark the shift, the maintenance stops. You get comfortable, or busy, or distracted by a new surface level demand. You stop reviewing whether what you are doing is actually aligned with where you want to go. And slowly, across weeks and months of small, nearly invisible choices, the habits weaken. The direction softens, the progress flattens. You go from playing the game to just being in it, reacting to whatever comes next instead of choosing what comes next. The dangerous thing about entropy is that it never announces itself. There is no moment where you suddenly realize you have drifted. It accumulates in the background, choice by tiny choice, until the distance between where you are and where you meant to be has become significant. And by then, most players have been drifting so long they have forgotten they were ever moving on purpose. This is the pattern the game is built to produce. The tutorial trains you to always be preparing for the next stage. School prepares for more school. More school prepares for a career. The career prepares for a retirement that may or may not arrive. And the entire time the player is grinding toward the next level without ever actually engaging with the level they are on. They reach the late game having collected resources, credentials, and obligations, but having missed the experience of actually playing. Alan Watts called this the deferred life plan, the habit of treating every present moment as preparation for a future moment that, when it finally arrives, gets treated the same way. In game terms, it is a player who speedruns every level to get to the next one and arrives at the final stage with nothing but an inventory full of things they never used. Background programs drain your processing power. Entropy degrades your direction. Together, they are the game's passive difficulty system. The slow, invisible tax on every player who stops paying attention to their own mechanics. But the game does not rely on passive threats alone. It also has active traps. mechanisms that were specifically designed by real systems with real resources to keep players exactly where they are. And unlike entropy, these traps do not feel like decay. They feel like living. The game is filled with things that feel like progress. That is one of its most elegant design features. There are activities built into the map that give your character a small, immediate hit of satisfaction. A quick pulse of something that registers as enjoyment, connection, rest, reward. Scrolling through feeds feels like staying informed. Consuming content for hours feels like unwinding. Buying something new feels like an upgrade. Eating for comfort feels like maintenance. Each one mimics the sensation of a real mechanic: rest, connection, growth, care, without producing any of the actual output those mechanics are supposed to generate. These are placebos, and in small doses, they are harmless. But when they become the primary source of satisfaction in a player's run, when the character reaches for them every time it needs to feel something, they quietly crowd out every activity that produces real development. Because real development in this game operates on a completely different system. It is slower, it requires sustained effort, it does not deliver instant feedback. But it compounds. A skill built over years returns more satisfaction in a single use than 1,000 hours of placebo activity combined. A relationship built on genuine depth provides more resilience in one crisis than a network of shallow connections provides in a lifetime. The real mechanics are harder to access. That is by design. The game makes the substitutes easy and available precisely because they keep most players from ever reaching the real thing. But the placebos are not the most dangerous mechanic on the map. They drain time, they dilute progress, but they do not fundamentally alter what the player is. There is something else in the game that does. The NPC conversion system. In any game, NPCs are the background characters. The shopkeeper who says the same line every visit. The villager who walks the same route every day regardless of what is happening around them. They do not choose. They do not adapt. They do not grow. They run on a script. They react to inputs. They have no agency. Earth has a mechanic that turns real players into this. And it is the most effective system in the entire game. The platforms, the media cycles, the content engines, the outrage loops, the comparison architectures. These are not neutral features of the map. They are design systems, built by real developers, optimized with real resources, and their function is specific. Capture the player's attention and hold it inside loops of consumption and reaction for as long as possible. Every hour a player spends inside these loops is an hour spent on autopilot, reacting to stimuli, consuming without creating, responding to what the system puts in front of them instead of choosing what they engage with. That is NPC behavior, and the system produces it at industrial scale. The part that makes this mechanic so effective is that it does not feel like conversion. It feels like participation, like being informed, like staying connected, like relaxing. Players who have been fully converted into NPCs often have no idea it has happened. They believe they are still making real choices. They believe their opinions are their own. And they believe their attention is going where they want it to go. The system is so well designed that the player loses agency without ever feeling the loss. Heraclitus saw this pattern 2,500 years ago. He said most people, even while awake, live as though they are asleep, moving through reality, reacting to the surface without ever grasping what operates beneath it. The only difference between his era and this one is scale. The game always had the capacity to put players to sleep. Screens just automated it. And here's the distinction that separates the players who are actually playing from the ones who only think they are. NPCs react, players choose. An NPC is defined by what the game does to them. A player is defined by what they do in the game. And that line, between reacting and choosing, is the most important line in the entire system. And most players are on the wrong side of it without knowing there is a line at all. James Carse made an observation that maps directly onto this. He said there are two kinds of games. Finite games are played to win. They have an endpoint, a destination, a conclusion. Infinite games are played to keep playing. The goal is not to finish, but to continue, to deepen, to expand the game itself. Most players on Earth are playing a finite game, trying to reach a number, trying to arrive somewhere, trying to win. And when they get there, if they get there, the game feels empty. Because they reached the end of a game that was never supposed to end. Life is not a finite game. It is an infinite one. The purpose was never to finish. It was to keep playing, and the players who understand this play a fundamentally different kind of run than the ones who are still trying to reach the final level. The tutorial trains players for known scenarios. But the game that is actually unfolding has never been played before. The players who thrive are not the most trained. They are the most adaptable, the most willing to engage with what they do not yet understand. So far, this review has covered what most players miss and what catches them. The incomplete tutorial, the hidden stats, the background drain, the passive decay, the placebo substitutes, the NPC conversion system. These are the mechanics that keep most runs mediocre. Not because the players lack capability, but because they never saw the systems operating on them. But the game is not only built to trap, it is also built to reward, and the players who figure out what it actually rewards play a version of this game that most characters will never experience. The game ships with default quests, standard missions that activate automatically if the player never takes manual control. Go through the education chain, secure a position, accumulate resources, acquire shelter, form a unit. Continue until the session ends. These quests are not bad. Some of them are genuinely important, but they were not designed for any specific character. They are generic. One-size-fits-all mission lines handed to billions of players with completely different builds, completely different strengths, completely different capacities. And most players accept them without ever stopping to ask whether these are the quests their character was actually built to run. And the players who built the strongest runs in the history of this game, the ones whose impact is still visible on the map long after their sessions ended, almost all share one mechanic. They designed their own quests. They looked at what genuinely pulled their attention, not what they were told should interest them, and they followed it. Not casually, seriously. They developed that curiosity into real capability. And they aimed that capability at something that mattered beyond their own character. Something that gave the effort weight even when the game got difficult. The smartest among them also did something most players never think to do. They mapped their anti-vision. They defined with total clarity the version of the run they absolutely refused to have. The drifted version, the settled version, was the version where they woke up in the late game and realized they had been running someone else's quest line the entire time. Knowing what you are running from sharpens every decision about what you are running toward. Underneath the quests, the game runs on 5 core systems, not surface features, architecture, the deep infrastructure that determines whether a character's run has substance or just the appearance of it. 1. Connections. Not the number of characters you interact with, the depth. Shallow connections produce almost nothing of lasting value. Deep ones, built on genuine trust, real knowledge of another character, actual investment over time, compound in ways that almost no other mechanic in the game can match. They provide resilience when the run gets hard. They open paths that no amount of solo grinding can access. And they make the experience of playing richer in ways that coins never will. 2. Production, creating something real, not just consuming what the map offers, but contributing back to it. Characters who only take from the game without building anything eventually feel hollow. Even the ones with full inventories. The act of producing, whether it is physical, intellectual, creative, gives the character's run its texture. It is what separates a player who was here from a player who just passed through. 3. Mindset. The internal game, how a character processes failure, whether difficulty registers as a threat or as information. What the character believes about its own capacity to grow. This single system determines trajectory more than starting stats ever could. A character with a weak build and a strong internal game will outperform a character with a strong build and a weak one. Every time, given enough run time. 4. Health, the foundation system. Physical, mental, emotional, not 3 separate things, but one integrated architecture. When it degrades, every other system degrades with it. Characters who treat health as optional, something to maintain when convenient, eventually discover that it is the platform everything else is standing on. And platforms that are neglected do not send warnings, they collapse. And the 5th system, understanding the game itself. This is the meta mechanic, studying how the whole thing actually operates. Zooming out far enough to see the patterns, the systems, the interactions between mechanics that surface-level players never notice. Most players never engage the system at all. They play on the surface, reacting to events as they come, following the path in front of them, never stepping back to ask how any of it actually works. The players who do engage it gain access to a fundamentally different level of decision-making. They can see moves that other players do not know exist. The science behind why this works is precise. The moments when a player feels most alive in this game, most absorbed, most engaged, most genuinely satisfied, are not moments of rest or consumption. They are moments of flow, states where the challenge in front of the character is calibrated just beyond the character's current ability, stretching them without crushing them. Video games produce this state deliberately. They match difficulty to skill and adjust constantly. As real life does not auto-calibrate, the player has to do it themselves. They have to choose quests that sit in their personal flow channel. Hard enough to produce growth, achievable enough to produce progress. Most players hand this design authority over to the game's default systems and spend their runs either overwhelmed by difficulty they did not choose or bored by a life that stopped challenging them. The best players take that authority back. They become the designers of their own difficulty. And there is a distinction here that changes how the entire game feels the moment a player recognizes it. Most characters, once especially deep into their run, are not playing the game. They are managing it, maintaining systems, handling demands, putting out fires, holding the current position together. Managing looks productive from the outside. It feels responsible. But the character is not moving. The run is not progressing. The year ends and the player's in the same position they started, just more depleted. Playing means moving somewhere on purpose. It means carving out time and energy for quests that were chosen, not assigned. Even a small shift from pure management to genuine play changes the experience of the entire game. One more mechanic that most players decode incorrectly, and the cost of getting it wrong is enormous: failure. In any game, when a player fails a level, the game is not telling them they are inadequate. It is telling them they used the wrong approach. The level is still there. The skills are still learnable. The failure was data, specific, useful information about what the current build cannot yet handle. The correct response is to study the data, or adjust and re-engage. Most players on Earth do the opposite. They take failure as a verdict on their character. They retreat. They choose easier missions. They stop engaging with the levels that would have developed them the fastest. The characters who grow the most in this game are almost always the ones who fail the most, because they are attempting the most. They understood what failure actually is. It is the game's teaching mechanic, not its judgment system. All of this matters. Every mechanic covered so far, the quests, the pillars, the flow channel, the failure system, these are the operational mechanics of a well-played run. But underneath all of them, there is one more layer. A scoring system that the game never shows you directly, one that most players do not discover until their run is nearly over. And it measures something completely different from what they spent most of their session chasing. Everything the game appears to measure during the middle sections of a run, the coins collected, the status accumulated, the possessions displayed, the metrics tracked, the achievements unlocked, registers on a scoreboard that every player can see. It is visible, constant, and the entire surface layer of the game is structured to make players chase it. It is not the real scoreboard. There is a deeper one, hidden, running quietly beneath the visible metrics the entire time. And it is tracking something else entirely. It tracks whether the player's choices came from genuine care or from self-protection. Every decision point in the game, and there are thousands of them across a run, originates from one of two impulses: connection or withdrawal, courage or defense. The players who score highest on this metric are not the ones who never felt the pull toward self-protection. They are the ones who felt it and chose the other direction anyway. It tracks the depth of connection with other characters, not how many were in the network, not how many knew the player's name, how many actually knew the player, how many were forgiven when forgiveness was difficult, how many were genuinely understood rather than merely tolerated. It tracks adaptability. The game will dismantle every player's plan at some point. Loss will arrive that was not scheduled. Failure will strike where confidence was highest. Something the player built carefully over years will collapse in a way that could not have been predicted. The scoreboard measures what happened next, whether the character absorbed it and grew, or whether that was the moment the run effectively ended even though the session continued. It tracks authenticity, whether the character played as themselves, their real values, their actual voice, their genuine priorities, or spent the run performing a version designed to earn approval from other characters. The game does not reward impressive performances, it rewards real ones, and it tracks contribution, whether the player left the map in better condition than they found it, whether something was given back, knowledge, creation, care, improvement, that benefited other characters or players who had not yet spawned. This mechanic is one of the highest scoring in the entire system, and it is consistently the most ignored by players focused on the visible scoreboard. Every one of these metrics is available to every character on the map. It does not matter what zone they spawned in. It does not matter how deep into the run they are. It does not matter how many years were spent in NPC mode or how many quests were run on default settings. The hidden scoreboard does not lock anyone out. It is always counting, and it is always accessible. There is one final mechanic that connects to all of this. The game delivers fear, pain, uncertainty, and loss to every character without exception. These are not malfunctions, they are load-bearing elements of the design. Without them, nothing in the game would have weight. Most characters, when these arrive, do the same thing. They fight, they suppress, they run, they distract. And every one of those responses does the same thing. It traps the emotion inside the system, where it becomes a background program, where it starts draining processing power, where it quietly degrades the character's capacity for everything else. The players who figured this out developed the most important upgrade in the game: the ability to let difficulty arrive, feel it fully, observe it without reacting to it, and let it pass through, not fighting it, not running from it, just letting it move. Characters who develop this capacity become extraordinarily difficult to permanently destabilize. Difficulty still reaches them. That is unavoidable, but it does not stay. It does not accumulate. It does not become the thing that defines the rest of the run, because resistance is what gives pain its permanence, and these players stopped resisting. That is the architecture, from the spawn point to the hidden scoreboard, from the broken tutorial to the fear mechanic. That's how the game actually works beneath the surface that most players never look past. And that leaves one question, the only one that matters now. How are you going to play from here? Most players never ask this. Most players walk through the entire game reacting to their spawn conditions, to other characters, to their own unexamined fears, to the default quest lines the game handed them before they were old enough to question whether those quests were theirs. They never study the mechanics. They never discover their real stats. They never close the programs draining their system. They never notice the drift. They never see the traps converting them into background characters running on loops they did not design and cannot name. They reach the end of the run and realize, with a clarity that comes far too late, that they were playing someone else's game the entire time. The players who actually thrive, the ones whose runs have substance and direction and weight, are the ones who at some point during the session stopped and realized something that changes everything. They are not the character, they are the player. The character is the role. The stats, the build, the spawn conditions, the accumulated habits, the identity that formed through years of unexamined repetition. The player is the awareness behind all of it. The one who can step back, study the mechanics, question the defaults, redesign the quests, close the programs, choose what to engage with and what to walk past. The character reacts. The player chooses. And the moment a player realizes they have been living as the character, identified completely with the role, running on autopilot, by mistaking reaction for choice, that is the moment the real game begins. The session is already in progress. It has been since you spawned. A portion of the run is behind you and it is not coming back. What is ahead is not guaranteed in length. But the mechanics are live. The pillars can still be built. The background can still be cleaned. The quests can still be rewritten. The hidden scoreboard is still counting. The question is not whether the game will continue. It will, until it doesn't. The question is whether the player is finally awake. Now tell me in the comments, which mechanic did you realize you have been missing? Which part of the game have you been playing blind to? Tell me. And if this review gave you a clearer view of the game you are in, if it showed you architecture you are walking through without seeing, then like the video and subscribe to this channel. This is where players come to study the game, not to be distracted by it, not to be entertained past it, to understand it, so they can finally play it on purpose. The session is live, the next move is yours.